one of my main goals is bringing queer people of color and specifically trans people of color into the mainstream. I want us to be visible everywhere all of the time and normalized because we are very much present and exist and we deserve to be here. My name is Theodoor Grimes, and I go by Grimes with 4 Gs. My pronouns are they, he, and I am a digital artist. I identify as queer, transmasculine, and bisexual. I am a professional illustrator, and I paint queer people of color with a focus on trans people. I get to do what I love every day. My presence is very heavy online, so I like to post my paintings on Instagram, Twitter, Threads now, and I have a community space where people can interact with each other and learn a lot. I'm on Instagram as like Grimes with 4 Gs, so GGGGRIMES, and I also have my website, grimes.com, 4 Gs as well. My Blackness is a very integral part of my identity. I am Afro-Caribbean, and I grew up in a very West Indian household. The culture of the West Indies, specifically Barbados, and my Blackness as an African American are heavily intertwined with my gender identity, my sexuality, and what I decided to do with my life. I grew up in the Bronx on the outskirts of Co-op City. So most of my friends lived in Co-op City, but I was kind of just like on this dead-end street on the top of a huge hill. And I had just like my mom, my brother, and my sister. And we just like had our little family unit that I grew up with. And I had a really nice childhood. It was really wonderful for me, honestly. My mom was always very supportive of me pursuing any arts as much as she supported me doing like math and science. I was allowed to play instruments, be in band, and spend hours of the day drawing or painting. My community was definitely very supportive. I was lucky enough to have a lot of programs like in the schools that I went to growing up. Teachers were really nice and really intelligent, had a lot to teach me. I've always kind of felt supported by my community. When I was in elementary school, I got to be on the Lego robotics team, which was a really cool thing for me. Every step of the way, I kind of had like adults and peers hyping me up and supporting me. It was a very good environment for me to grow up in, to get to where I am today. I would say my 2 greatest role models were actually just my older brother and older sister. I'm very into astrology and they're both Capricorns and I'm a Taurus. So I'm like, okay, I have these 2 incredible earth signs in front of me in life. They worked really hard all the time. They had good balances between like friendships and relationships, school and work. So I kind of just always aspired to be like them. And they also were supportive of me all the time growing up. It was a very give and take relationship with them, and they would even tell me like, I inspired them, so it was really cool. I just always knew that I wanted to be like them when I grew up. I wanted to be hardworking, I wanted to be dedicated to the people I love, and I wanted to feel like I could make a difference in people's lives. My brother works for NBC, actually. He works in the tech department. She just like helps people all the time, every day, with fixing their computer problems from small to big. And my sister is like a hiring manager, I think at this point. And she works for Pandora, actually. That's a pretty recent job for her, but it's really cool. And she's like one of the only Black, queer, also women in this field and in this community that she works in. So it's really awesome, like getting to see her be like a badass Capricorn boss all the time. It was definitely really difficult for her to be out at the time that she was. And she definitely had some like tension within our family that kind of caused her to leave home for a while and like kind of set up her own life. I think it's one of the bravest things that I've ever seen her do and give my mom the space and time to learn more and kind of grow up. And it was really, really cool watching her forge her own path. She inspired me a lot. She got all of these tattoos and piercings when I wanted tattoos and piercings. I copied her in many different ways. Since I was like in elementary school, very young, I knew that I was different, but I didn't exactly have the language to describe what was happening to me in my brain. I experienced like really severe dysphoria from the time I was in like second grade, I remember. Gender expectations get put on you pretty young. So people started gendering me very heavily and telling me the things I could do and couldn't do. And I rebelled against that from a very young age. But it wasn't until I think middle school when I had access to the internet for the first time. And I was like on MySpace, of course, and just going around the internet. And at the time, I was like starting to dress very alternatively, and I was emo. I identified as bisexual, like a lot of emos did back in the day. It was kind of cool because it was my gateway into the queer community through this alternative style. And then I realized, oh, I want to look like a boy, but like a soft boy. I want to be androgynous more than anything else. By the time I was like 16 and on Tumblr, I realized I was non-binary, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm learning all of these terms for everything. I've kind of just like had my journey keep going since that point. My friends were definitely queer to some degree because, of course, queer people always find each other even without knowing the terms for ourselves. But I didn't have any spaces that I felt like I could really safely explore my identity and talk to other people about it. Most of the time it was online for me. With Tumblr, that was where I met a ton of other specifically trans masked people, that we had a little enclave there on the internet, and we were allowed to talk about how dysphoric we were feeling and all of the other angsty 17-year-old feelings you could possibly have. I met my current partner and fiance, who's also non-binary. I kind of just like started hanging out with them and like people they talk to more. And I suddenly found myself surrounded by way more queer people, trans people, gay people, lesbians, dykes, like whatever people you could say. And it was very freeing for me. I started being able to perform my gender a lot more. At the time, I was like going through very hyper femme phase. And so I was feeling really good about performing and about letting loose and being myself and being flamboyant and happy and queer and safe. I started transitioning when I was in my 20s. And here I am now, 28, and I've been on testosterone for a couple of years. I had top surgery in 2021, and I am very out. I was always interested in artwork from the time I was really young. I had a friend in elementary school that we would watch anime on Toonami and then go back to school and like draw together, like draw a lot of manga and anime together and talk and have fun. And he taught me a lot. As I got older, I just continued to be very invested in art. Went through, of course, my horrible manga phase for many, many years. Then I got into watercolors. My brother gifted me my very first digital tablet, and my life just completely changed from that moment. I was like, this is the medium for me. I never want to turn back, and I really haven't. In terms of being online, I was Tumblr famous as well. Like I had at the time a following of like 10K, which was a really big deal at the time. It's kind of funny looking back because I have like 92K followers on Instagram right now. So 10K in like 2011 was pretty decent. I kind of like became known as this internet person very young. People were talking about me in my school as like this Tumblr famous person. It was kind of weird for me because I am just being myself in these like spaces because I don't feel safe enough to do that offline. All of these things kind of just combine to get me to where I am today and be so heavily involved in online spaces, on social media, and in the art community. I went to Hunter College. I majored in music actually, and I double minored in sociology and Africana studies. In my like early 20s, I was kind of having a very intense and real deconstruction of race, sexuality, gender, and how they all work together to oppress each and every single one of us. My world kind of felt shattered, and it was a very painful time for me, especially because I'd gone to a high school where I experienced racism and queerphobia on a nearly daily basis. At the same time, I was like, I'm about to graduate college in a couple years. I don't really see myself being a musician, even though I have spent the last 3 years studying music so heavily. I was really confused and didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I remember I was working at a summer camp and I was just like doodling in the kids' art class one day. And they were super sweet and so funny and nice. But they saw me doodling and they were like, "You're really good at art." And at that point, I felt like pretty distant from artwork actually for a while. So hearing like such positive affirmation about art just flipped something in my brain. And I went out and I bought a bunch of sketch pads and like other art supplies. And I just really dedicated myself to painting and using ink and trying out different mediums and just having a good time and feeling safe in my artistic expression. And at that point, I had like an Instagram account that I was just mostly just me posting photos of like friends and stuff. And I started posting my artwork on there and, people responded a little bit. And it was just felt, again, like a safe space for me to express myself artistically. I kept doing that. And in my last year of college, I decided, you know what, let me talk to my family. I was like, when I graduate, give me a year to figure this out, to see if I can get anywhere with art. And I never looked back. It kind of just like fell into place from there. It was a really big risk for me to take because at the time I was homeless, actually. I was living in the shelter with my mom and brother in East Harlem for like 5-6 years at that point. And it was really scary for me to be like, I want to follow this path and this dream. And they were like, sure, go for it. See what you can do. I really went very far in like a very short amount of time. A lot of what I learned about being present online, I learned on my own. I had to spend hours of my time researching on YouTube how to work on a tablet, how to make your brain connect to like this thing that's like so inorganic. What platforms I should use to show my artwork. Do I want to stick to Instagram only? Should I go to other platforms? I had a lot of problems with technology just suddenly not working the way it was supposed to. My first 2 years was just learning, and trying to figure out how everything works and figuring out the algorithm on Instagram, like what tags to use, how to get people to find me, how to network, how to sell my artwork. I set up a website. I applied for a grant to be able to set up my website. And I really learned all of this like pretty much on my own and with some help from other artists at the time who were just starting to get popular online too. I think digital is my favorite because my hands shake a lot, actually. Like I've always had pretty unsteady hands. And when I did primarily watercolor, I would make mistakes a lot and not be able to undo them. I love that digital artwork is accessible. People like to downplay how impactful and important digital artwork is because you can undo mistakes. It doesn't take away from the fact that this is a person pouring their energy, their soul, their life, the things that they've learned into a piece. It was very nice being able to make mistakes and fix them. It's good to be able to know that you don't have to be bound to one thing. You can experiment, you can play around, you can just like mess with everything. Also, being online and having this platform online just made it so that I could expand who I was talking to. It went from me basically working only in Manhattan and having shows in Manhattan to suddenly I was like talking to people and booking gigs across the world. I was having people from other countries telling me that my artwork was helping them figure out things about themselves, about people that they loved, and start conversations. Digital artwork in the digital world has always just been a savior for me. I don't think that there was that much space for us at first, especially in terms of the online artist community. I remember at the time, a lot of the artists that were big on Instagram at that point were a lot of just like white men, like white cishet men, a lot of white cishet women. I didn't feel like there was really a voice for people like me. Even the artists that did portray slightly different people were doing like just not enough. I really decided I wanted to use my platform that I was starting to get to show people who looked like me, who behaved like me and talked like me and had never been able to be in these spaces before. I've worked really hard to create a safe space online for people to view my artwork and be themselves, interact with it, share it. I learned early on like how to moderate my comments and how to set boundaries with people and rules. Be like, if you even say this, like you're done, like you're gone, because this has to be a place where people can feel safe, where they can thrive and be themselves. With the algorithm changes in 2021, Instagram kind of like uplifted us all and then like threw us all away. A lot of people would tell me and the other artists I knew, I only joined Instagram so I could follow your artwork and see what you're up to. And then they would not see us at all. But nothing can ever take away from the fact that this group of artists, queer artists who had very traumatizing histories, most of us, with being out and queer, created this enormous safe space for people online. Threads just came out, and because it was a new platform that the algorithm was just not there yet, the moment I posted something, I had people telling me to kill myself. And I was like, oh wow, like this is lawless territory at this point in time. There's not enough protections yet. There aren't ways for me to really have my audience be able to interact with me safely while getting rid of all of the queer phobes and the violent ones at that, like the ones who will say horrendous things to you like this. It's very scary, honestly, venturing out into unknown territory when you're used to like this one particular platform and this one particular space. I have Twitter, and I've had a lot of positive interactions with posting my work on Twitter. But even then, because Twitter has this reputation of toxic people getting to run amok, I've always been scared of being on there. Back in the day, Tumblr used to be this really awesome haven for people as well. But with Sesta Fossa and everything, the rise of conservatism in the US and globally, it's feeling like more dangerous to be queer and to be sex positive and to let yourself just be, period, as a queer person online. But what helps is the community still. For example, if someone's page gets deleted because Instagram's censorship is like very queer phobic, you have an army of people willing to be as annoying as hell to get your Instagram page back. So there are these small protections in a way, but again, that's only as a result of the community being there for each other. It's nice because you do have like this global community, people across the world at different time zones able to do this work to help, but it's definitely scary being queer online. I'm honestly concerned frequently at this point that things that aren't even like inherently sexual that I post might get taken down. If I even say a statement referencing white people, I've had people report it, or the Instagram bots like take it down, and I'm told that if I keep acting this way, I'm going to have my account deleted. And I'm like, I didn't even say anything. It's very scary to be a queer person of color and try to talk about things openly online and bridge these gaps between different people and feel like you have to walk on eggshells a lot of the time. I want to be able to say a lot and help a lot and explore different parts of identity and being, but what's too far? The queer community online is a blessing. The internet has led to people being able to connect in such authentic ways. I know that I would not be where I am today being able to like even pay my rent every month if not for queer community on Instagram. I had my top surgery funded by people on Instagram. Like I shared that I wanted top surgery, and within like a couple of days I had my goals met and I was able to get that for myself. The queer community online is irreplaceable. I would not understand so much about my identity and be able to explore in my artwork what other people's identities are so safely for them without seeing what the queer community has to offer. There's so many different people online. There's sex workers, there's artists, there's performers, there's regular ass jobs like teachers that are still doing fantastic and amazing work and giving their perspective and letting everyone know you can be queer and you can be happy. You actually can. And it takes a lot of times getting yourself out of a specific place a specific time, sticking it out and fighting really hard to make things better for yourself. And of course, some of us are luckier than others, but the queer community online really can help you feel like there's happiness on the other side of this. There's hope. There's a chance for me to find a path in my life that is safe and full of joy. I kind of go into most workspaces, like if I have to do anything with meetings online or even being in person, I kind of go in being like, listen, I'm trans, I'm non-binary, these are my pronouns, this is what it is. And I refuse to work with people who aren't accepting of that. If I hear something that's like from someone that's out of pocket, I'm just like, I don't like that this person gave this feedback because it's literally transphobic. I'm not going to portray this kind of thing in my artwork because I don't get to portray that because that's not my identity. If my work is inherently political, if my work is so focused on me bringing trans people of color into the mainstream, how can I do that without focusing on the fact that I am a trans Black person? It goes together and I wouldn't even want to hide it. I would rather just work with people who respect that. There's so many barriers for us because if we are living in environments and growing up in spaces where we don't even feel safe enough to explore very core parts of our identity, it kind of just trickles out through there. It's like a domino effect. If you don't have the confidence here, you don't have the confidence to do anything. You don't have the confidence to follow a path that you might want to follow. Beyond that, there are queer phobes running rampant throughout the world. You might want to get a job in a certain field, and if the interviewer views you as someone who might even potentially be queer, they might just be like, no, because I'm not hiring a queer person. And they don't have to say that, but it could be the reason. And they're just roadblocks. I spent so much of my time as a teenager being closeted and depressed and not knowing what to do with my very intense dysphoria that I didn't have the chance to think about what I wanted to do with my future. I didn't think I would have a future. I thought that I was going to probably kill myself before I even got to a place in life that a job was necessary. Very basic safety has to be available for queer people in order for us to get anywhere in life. When people say things about like why it's so important for queer people to talk about being ourselves and why we need representation, blah, blah, blah. If I can't even accept myself, how am I supposed to live in any capacity? We should be able to talk about it because we need to grow and learn and process this part of ourselves so that we can be happy. When I started my art career and I specifically talked about wanting to portray queer people of color, I had pushback. I had people telling me that I was being racist and heterophobic because I wanted to portray specific people. I remember this one time my work was reposted by Afropunk and it was so exciting for me. And then I read through the comments and it was just like homophobes running amok and the platform not doing anything to moderate those comments. I think about, for me as a Black queer artist, how often I've wanted to be more involved in queer spaces and spaces full of people of color. And then you have this thing of like, okay, well, so many of these people are queerphobic that I want to be working with. And then so many of these people are racist that I want to work with. And I can't do either. I'm not allowed to be in either of those spaces, which again just leads back to queer people creating our own spaces and forcing ourselves into the spotlight and being like, if you're not going to create the space for me, I'll do it myself. And then the people who understand my worth will come around and they'll come to me, they'll invite me and they'll tell me, we want you here. And that has really been my experience. I refuse to undermine my values. And I refuse to compromise very important parts of myself just to book a gig. A couple of years ago, when I was living in Philly, I collaborated with Save Art Space and I created a painting to put on a billboard. Pretty close to where I actually live in the Bronx right now, I had a billboard up that said Black trans people are sacred. And it was like 3, I think, Black trans people that I painted and put on this billboard, and it lived there for like a few months, and it was honestly really cool. I didn't get to see it in person, but other people saw it and took photos for me, and it's like one of the biggest things I'm proud of in my career, because what better way to put trans people of color in the mainstream than a giant billboard saying Black trans people are sacred in the Bronx, on a very busy road. Another really cool project that I always feel proud of was this puzzle collaboration that I did with Gucci and My Blackness, My Queerness, I believe. I just created this illustration of queer Black people in a safe space of their home. And like there's vinyl records on the wall and a big couch, and they're like decked out in Gucci. And it was just like so fun for me to paint so much texture and these different patterns. I had a lookbook that basically they sent me full of like hundreds of designs. And I got to go through all of the designs and pick out my favorite things and I send them in for approval. And then I got to paint all of them. It was one of the coolest things I think I've ever done in my career. And I still cite it often now. And like with commissions, it's one of the ones that people like to reference a lot when they're like, oh, well, we want to do a piece with you. And we really like this one from Gucci that you did. And I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. I collaborate with OGX and I designed a huge mural for them basically that was like also an ad, and that was in Soho, but it was like this giant mural that also had information about me and like me being non-binary and Black. I will paint queer people of color for commissions. I try to make them as diverse as possible. I can get to say to people, this person's trans and they're openly trans and they're look how happy they are and how confident and hot. It's really cool that I get to do that. People might not look at my paintings and necessarily assume queerness, but so much of my artwork is like these hints for queer people of like, I can tell that person's queer, I can tell that person's trans, because look at their piercings or look at like their tattoo, look at like all of these small little details that show queerness. I also, a few years ago, when I was doing really, really well in my business for a while, I had a Black trans artist grant where I essentially set aside $1,000 of my own money and I posted it online. I was like, I'm going to give away $1,000 to a Black trans artist. I had a few hundred people apply. So I spent a lot of time going through all of these applications. And I think at the time it was like pretty soon after I had top surgery, actually. So it was kind of a project that it kept me busy while I was also healing from major surgery. The artist that I ended up choosing was Jonathan Soren Davidson, I believe is their name. And he is like a really awesome Black trans artist that does like these really cool, like darker themed illustrations. I don't even know how to explain it, but his artwork is just phenomenal. And it was really exciting for me having the capital to give to someone else in that way. And I would love to do it again in the future and even like collaborate with a different brand or something to provide more grants or a bigger grant for someone, because I know how much money over $1,000 can do for an artist that's trying to pay rent and buy groceries and just live. The advice that I would give to my younger self is to talk about my feelings more. I think that if I had spoken earlier on about my dysphoria, even if I didn't have the language to describe it, if I had simply just said what was going on with me, I probably would have gotten help a lot sooner. I was surrounded by adults who wanted to help me and were willing to help me process all of these feelings and figure out what could get me to where I needed to be. But I was just so afraid that what I was experiencing was wrong that I denied the feelings within myself and I didn't talk about it. I even talked about my sexuality before talking about my gender stuff. I wish I could tell myself when I was like 16, 17, that it's okay for you to have intense feelings about your gender not feeling correct. And if you explore that, you'll be able to learn more about what you can even do. Because if I had known about hormone blockers when I was younger, I would have definitely been on them. I could have done so many things to help myself and be happier in my body. It took me until I was like in my 20s before I started feeling good in my body. And I'm like, I deserve that so much sooner in life. I didn't have a lot of freedom growing up because a combination of being a girl in a West Indian household and being so depressed, like I wasn't trusted to do things and take care of myself a lot. And that really negatively affected me. It took me many years after that before I gained the independence and self-assuredness to be like, I'm going out and doing this thing. You can't tell me I can't do this because I need to do this in order to be happy. Do your research. There are so many free resources online. There are YouTube videos, there are endless articles, and there's free software to experiment and do things on. You don't need to go to college to necessarily learn and to go into a certain field. And if you do need to have schooling or a certificate for things, do whatever you can without that before you get to that stage. And I truly believe as long as you show the universe that you are willing to learn and do what it takes to follow your dreams, the universe will follow suit. The universe will be like, okay, I got you. I see that you're trying this thing. So let's take it a step further. Let yourself make mistakes. I've made so many mistakes in my career, and mistakes have only led me to learn and grow. I try not to beat myself up about things that have happened in the past, not charging enough money or not getting royalties or not knowing what files to export my work as. These mistakes will only help you grow. Try to find a way and a place where you can authentically be yourself, no matter how secret it is. Even if it's just you alone in your bedroom, you are allowed to be yourself all the time, but you need a place that you can 100% experiment with your aesthetic. What voice do I want to have? How do I want to sound? Play around with your feelings and your thoughts and just process things in different ways, because this is the only way that you'll become stronger within yourself, is by questioning a lot and unpacking and not letting people get into your head about what you want and need out of your life.